The first time Howard disappeared, it was 3 weeks before the wedding. Rosetta had just finished folding lavender-colored napkins for the reception and was picking out songs for their first dance when his call came through, short, breathless, and clipped. "I can't do this right now. I just need some space." She thought maybe he panicked. Maybe it was cold feet. Everyone gets jittery before a big step. But the space he asked for turned into silence. No texts, no calls, no explanations. For 9 whole days, Howard was gone like dust in the wind. And just when Rosetta was ready to file a missing person report, he showed up, disheveled, eyes tired, and arms full of excuses. "I was overwhelmed," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Everything felt too fast, too perfect. I needed to breathe." She forgave him. Of course she did. Because that's what you do when you believe in someone. When you've spent years weaving a future with them. She told herself it was a one-time thing. A hiccup before forever. The second time he vanished, it was 2 days before the wedding. Flowers were already at the venue. The dress was steamed and hanging in her closet. Rosetta had just finished helping her younger cousin pick out a flower crown when she noticed the silence again. No message from Howard since morning. She called, then texted, then called again. Hours passed. Her fingers trembled with the same dread she'd buried the last time. Her friends told her to stay calm. He was probably caught up in last-minute arrangements. But by midnight she knew. He had run again. This time, he didn't show up until the day after the wedding was supposed to happen. No apology, just a crooked smile, like he was walking back into something as simple as a lunch date. "I just froze," he said. "It's like something inside me locks up. I don't know how to explain it." Rosetta stood there, too stunned to even cry. Her heart felt like it had been vacuum sealed, pressurized until it barely thumped. And yet, she forgave him again. Not because she was weak, but because love makes fools out of the strongest souls. The third time, there was no wedding planned. She was smarter now. She told herself she wouldn't wear white again until he showed her he could stay. That he could fight the fear instead of running from it. And for a year, Howard did. He showed up to therapy. He held her hand like it mattered. He made promises, with eyes that didn't flicker. Rosetta believed him. She really believed this was it. That maybe love just needed enough tries to get it right. And then he vanished a third time. No warning, no goodbye. That was the night something inside her snapped. Not loud and messy, but quiet like a rope coming loose from a ceiling beam. The future she kept clinging to began to feel like a story someone else wrote. A cruel fable about a woman too patient for her own good. She didn't wait for him this time. She didn't leave the porch light on. When he called days later, the sound of his name on her screen didn't twist her stomach. It just dulled her. Like background noise she'd heard too many times. She answered, but not to hear him out. "I'm done," she said softly, before he could say a word. "You don't get to vanish and come back anymore. Not in this life. Not in any." Click. That should have been the end. But it was only the beginning. 2 months later, Rosetta was walking through the aisles of an old bookstore when her hand brushed against another, reaching for the same novel. She looked up and met Calvin's eyes. A stranger's smile, calm and kind, wrapped in the warm scent of worn paper and cinnamon. He didn't vanish. Not that day. Not the day after. Not when she told him her story. Voice trembling from old scars. "I'm not here to replace anyone," Calvin said gently, taking her hand. "I just want to show you what it feels like when someone stays." And he did. Until the night Howard returned. Again. Not just returned. He came back reborn. As if something cosmic had hit reset on his soul. confident, stable. Remorse in his eyes so deep it could drown her. "I died last year, Rosetta," he said, voice breaking. "I know it sounds crazy, but I did. And I came back, remembering everything, every mistake, every time I left you. And I'm here now. I'm staying." She looked at him like a ghost, because that's exactly what he was. The room felt colder with Howard standing there. Not because the windows were open or the heater was off, but because his presence stirred something old inside Rosetta, something tired and cracked, like a worn book with too many creases in the same chapter. Calvin was just in the other room, laughing on the phone with his sister. The sound of him, steady, real, present, was like a lifeline. Howard stepped forward. "I didn't come to destroy what you have. I swear, Rosetta. I needed you to know." She didn't say anything. Not yet. Her eyes kept scanning his face, half expecting it to blur, to flicker like a broken screen. If this was some trick, some delusion her heart conjured in a weak moment, it was too vivid, too full of breath and sorrow. "I remember it all," he whispered. "Every time I left, every second you waited. I remember how you looked the last time I ran, and I can't forgive myself for that. But I don't want your forgiveness. I just want to give you this." He reached into his coat and pulled out something small, creased, stained, but unmistakable. Their old marriage certificate, the one they'd filled out in hopeful ink, but never filed. The one she'd tucked away in the drawer after the second disaster, too angry to rip and too sad to look at again. Howard held it out to her. "Tear it," he said. "Tear it in front of me. Free yourself. I don't deserve it, Rosetta. I know that now." Her fingers curled around the paper slowly. Calvin stepped into the doorway then, pausing mid-step as he caught sight of the stranger in the room. His smile faded. "Everything okay?" Rosetta didn't answer right away. She just looked at Howard. Really looked at him. There was no arrogance in him now. No charm trying to spin stories. Just a man carrying the ruins of who he used to be. "I spent years waiting on a man who didn't know how to love me," she said, voice steady but quiet. "I begged the universe for answers, for signs, for anything to help me make sense of your leaving. And now you're standing here, with your soul rewired and your memory full of regrets." She glanced at Calvin. His jaw was tight, but his eyes held no judgment, just worry and love. Rosetta turned back to Howard, lifting the certificate with both hands, and then, slowly, purposefully, she tore it in two. The sound was sharp and clean. It filled the space between them like a final breath. "I'm not tearing it for you," she said. "I'm doing it for me, for the version of me that waited, and cried and thought she wasn't enough." Howard flinched, but nodded. "You were always more than enough, and yet you kept vanishing." He lowered his head. "I know." Calvin walked over and gently placed his hand on Rosetta's shoulder. "Do you want him to stay?" he asked her without anger. Just a question, just clarity. Rosetta looked at Howard again. She didn't see the man she once loved. She saw as a memory, a ghost, a lesson in heartbreak. "No," she said, simple and sure. "Not anymore." Howard didn't argue. He just gave a slow nod, eyes wet. "Then thank you for everything. I hope you find peace." She didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. He left, and this time he didn't come back. Later that night, as Calvin poured her tea and wrapped her in a blanket, Rosetta finally exhaled. For the first time in years, the past didn't feel like a chain. It felt like a closed door. "Do you believe in second chances?" she asked, curling into his warmth. Calvin kissed her forehead. "Only if they're real. And right now, this, us, feels like the only thing that's ever made sense. And in that silence, with the shredded certificate tucked into the trash, Rosetta handed her heart to someone who never asked her to beg for it. The days that followed weren't filled with dramatic changes or emotional whirlwinds. They were quiet, and quiet to Rosetta had never felt so powerful. She no longer woke up to check her phone for a message that might never come. She no longer flinched at the sound of footsteps on her porch, or reread old conversations for some hidden clue she missed. Peace didn't come all at once. It tiptoed in, slow and cautious, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. Calvin, true to his nature, didn't rush her. He didn't press for declarations or ask for milestones. He was simply there, making her coffee how she liked it, with the almond milk first, so it didn't curdle, laughing at her dry humor, sitting with her in silence when the weight of her memories got too loud. And it was working, until Kathleen showed up at her door one afternoon, eyes sharp and mouth full of fire. "I heard he came back," she said, not even offering a hello. "Howard, you didn't tell me." Rosetta stepped aside and let her in, sighing. "Because it didn't matter. He's gone now." "You sure?" Kathleen's heels clicked on the hardwood like a metronome of judgment. "Because when a man comes back from the dead just to find you, that usually means something. It means he needed closure," Rosetta replied, voice low. "I already had mine." Kathleen raised a brow. "You always were the hopeful one. But don't be naive, Rosie. Some people don't come back just to say goodbye. They come back to take back what they think they still own." Rosetta stiffened. "He doesn't own anything here. Not anymore." "Good," Kathleen said, folding her arms. "Because I saw him." Rosetta's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" "Last night, on my street, sitting in his car, just parked. He looked like hell." A chill ran up Rosetta's spine, not from fear, but from the unnerving idea that Howard might not have accepted her answer, that the goodbye wasn't as clean-cut as she thought. Calvin noticed the shift in her. That evening, as they sat on the porch, he placed his hand gently over hers. "Want me to talk to him?" Rosetta shook her head. "I don't want any more conversations with ghosts. If he's still lingering, he's not here for me. He's here for himself." But deep down, some part of her wasn't so sure. She started noticing things. A shadow moving past her shop window, a little too slowly. A familiar cologne at the farmer's market. The way her dog barked at nothing near the backyard fence. It wasn't enough to accuse, but it was enough to feel, and then came the letter, folded, and tucked inside the mailbox, like an old love note. No return address, just her name on the front. Inside, Howard's handwriting, still neat, still slanted, spilled across the page in words that made her chest tighten. "If you're reading this, it means I haven't come back again. It means I'm trying, for once in my life, to respect your peace. But Rosetta, something's wrong with me. Ever since I came back, I've been haunted by places, by smells, by visions I can't explain. I remember every time I left you, but I also remember something else, something not from this world. I think I died, not just died, left this place, crossed something I wasn't supposed to, and now something's trying to follow me back." Rosetta stared at the page, her heart pounding, every part of her mind rejecting what she was reading. "I'm not asking for help. I'm asking for forgiveness. Because if what's following me ever finds its way to you, I needed you to know. I never meant to bring this to your door." She dropped the letter like it burned her fingers. Calvin picked it up and read it in silence, his jaw tightening with every line. "This some kind of manipulation?" he asked, but his voice lacked conviction. Even he wasn't sure. "I don't know," Rosetta whispered. "But if he's telling the truth, Then he didn't just come back wrong. Calvin finished. He brought something with him. And just like that, the quiet shattered. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Rosetta lay in bed with the letter still etched in her mind like an old scar, reopened. Calvin lay beside her, but the space between them felt filled with the weight of something neither of them could explain. Every creak of the house, every sudden gust of wind outside the window made her flinch, not because she believed in ghosts or otherworldly horrors, but because Howard believed something had followed him back, and Rosetta knew, better than anyone, that Howard was never the type to spin stories for sympathy. The next morning, they didn't talk much. Calvin made breakfast, and she stared at her untouched eggs, her fork still. When she finally looked up, his eyes met hers with a question he didn't say aloud. "I need to find out what he meant," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. Calvin put the fork down. "You want to see him?" "No," she replied, quickly. "Not see, just find out where he's been. What happened? I know he's not lying about dying. I saw it in his eyes. He didn't come back the same." Calvin leaned back, thinking. "I could talk to a friend at the hospital. They keep death records, even the ones that are quietly erased. If Howard really died, there's got to be something." Rosetta nodded slowly, grateful. "And Kathleen said she saw him near her street. Maybe he's staying close." That afternoon, she went alone. Kathleen's neighborhood was only a few blocks away, quiet and leafy, with aging brick houses and long driveways. She didn't know what she was expecting. A note on a windshield. Howard pacing nervously in an alley. Something dramatic. But what she found instead was stranger. At the end of the block, an old abandoned church sat behind a rusted gate. The doors were padlocked. The windows were dust-covered and cracked. But her gut twisted the second she looked at it. Something about that place felt wrong. She walked the perimeter slowly, and there, behind the back wall, hidden beneath a piece of corrugated metal, she found signs of life: an old blanket, a half-burnt candle, and a notebook. It was Howard's handwriting again. She opened it. The first pages were apologies, confessions, pages and pages of remorse, scribbled with shaking hands. But then it got darker. "It's in the shadows now. It doesn't like the light. It hates noise. I don't sleep anymore. Not because I'm afraid of dying again, but because I'm afraid I'll wake up in that other place again. That place without time, without warmth. And I know it wants to come through." Page after page was filled with drawings, hollow figures, twisted faces, symbols she didn't recognize, and one word, circled over and over, split. As she turned to the last page, she froze. There, in messy ink, was her name. "Rosetta, if you're reading this, you were always the only thing that kept me tethered. But if you feel anything, cold, behind your back, silence that feels too heavy, if you dream of me standing still and not blinking, leave. Don't look for me again." She stepped back, notebook clutched to her chest, her breath shallow. That night, Rosetta sat across from Calvin at the kitchen table. She laid the book down in front of him, and he flipped through it in silence, his expression unreadable. "It sounds like psychosis," he said. "Or trauma." "I don't think so," she whispered. "I felt something at that church. I don't believe in supernatural things, Calvin, but this doesn't feel like imagination. It feels like a warning." As if to confirm her fear, the lights flickered, just once. But it was enough to pull the air out of the room. Calvin stood up, going to check the breaker, muttering something about old wiring. But Rosetta sat there, frozen, eyes darting to the window. For just a second, she thought she saw a figure, still, too still, standing across the street beneath the street lamp, watching. No movement, no face, just presence. When Calvin returned, the figure was gone. He didn't see it, but Rosetta had, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure if Howard had really come back alone. The next morning, the feeling still hadn't left her chest, that cold pressure, like something unseen resting on her ribs. It didn't go away with sunlight. It didn't fade with coffee or distractions. It sat with her, like a warning trying to be patient. She didn't mention the figure to Calvin, not yet, not because she didn't trust him. He was the one person who never made her feel small, but because she wasn't sure what she saw, what she felt. Instead, she showed him the notebook again, pointing at the word circled over and over. Split. You. Think it's a place? Calvin asked. A thing? A person? Rosetta shook her head. Maybe it's a memory. Maybe it's a state of mind. But whatever it is, Howard's scared of it. And I think I am too. Calvin tapped the table. Then let's go back. Together. If that church is part of this, we'll find out. They returned in daylight. The church looked no less eerie under the sun. More, if anything, like it didn't belong in the modern world. The brick was too faded, the windows too empty. Even the birds avoided it. Calvin brought bolt cutters. Rosetta didn't ask where he got them. The padlock clattered to the ground with a sharp snap. The doors creaked open slowly, and the smell hit them immediately. Mildew, ash, something faintly metallic, like dried blood and rot, hidden in old wood. Inside, pews were broken. The altar had collapsed on one side. Light filtered in through the shattered stained glass, casting strange shadows on the floor. Rosetta took slow steps, her breath loud in, the silence. And then she saw it, carved deep into the far wall, behind where the pulpit once stood, the same symbol from Howard's notebook. A circle split down the middle, like an eye cracked in two. What the hell is that? Calvin asked, stepping closer. I think it's what he saw. Wherever he went when he died. They were about to turn back when they heard it. A whisper, not like someone speaking, but like wind trying to speak. It slithered between the rafters, words almost forming, then falling apart. Rosetta's skin prickled. Calvin grabbed her hand. His palm was ice. They rushed outside, locking the door again, breathing hard like they'd just surfaced from deep underwater. In the car, Rosetta turned. To him. You heard that. He nodded. His jaw clenched. Yeah. And I want to pretend it was just the wind. But I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think we should go back, she said. I don't think it matters, he replied. I think whatever this is, it's already with us. That night, the figure returned. But this time, it was closer. Rosetta saw it through the bedroom window, standing on the edge of the yard, still, watching. But not just watching her, watching the house, studying it. Like it was waiting for something. She didn't scream. She didn't wake Calvin. She just stared back. And then, slowly, its head tilted. Just a fraction, and it was gone. In the morning, she found footprints in the dirt. Bare feet, too long, too narrow, not human. Calvin didn't question her anymore. He started keeping a flashlight in every room, salt by the windows. He didn't say he believed in spirits or other worlds, but he believed her, and that was enough. But Howard was still out there, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was unraveling wherever he was hiding, that the thing he brought back wasn't done with him, and maybe, just maybe, it wasn't done with her either. So she made a decision. She was going to find him one last time, not to fix things, not to forgive him, but to end it, whatever it was, even if it meant stepping into the darkness he came crawling out of. Finding Howard wasn't easy. He had a way of disappearing even when he wasn't trying to. People barely remembered him, as if he'd become a flicker in their memories. Rosetta started calling old contacts. His former landlord, his cousin, even the bartender at that little place they used to go to when things were good. Most had no idea where he was. A few didn't even seem to remember he'd come back at all. It was like the world had decided to pretend he was still dead, but not. Kathleen. When Rosetta showed up on her porch, Kathleen opened the door before she could knock. "He's at the docks," she said, voice flat. "Warehouse 3B. Been crashing there for a few days." He looked bad. How bad? Kathleen just shook her head. "Worse than any man I've ever seen." But that's not what scared me. It's what was around him. The air felt wrong. Rosetta drove alone this time. Calvin had offered to come, but she needed space to think, to be the version of herself who had once believed she and Howard could fix anything. She needed to say goodbye to that girl, for real this time. The docks were half deserted. Old shipping crates stacked like forgotten bones, rusted metal glinting in the dim afternoon light. Warehouse 3B sat crooked at the end, its doors slightly ajar. The air smelled of salt and oil, and something faintly burned. She stepped inside. The place was dark, but not silent. There was a low, constant humming, like machinery running deep underground. Rosetta followed it through rows of crates until she found him. Howard. He sat on the ground, his back against a pillar, arms wrapped around his knees. He looked thinner, hollow, like the color had drained from his skin. His eyes darted up when he saw her, wide and almost childlike. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "It knows you now." Rosetta knelt in front of him, trying not to flinch. "What did you bring back, Howard? What followed you?" He blinked slowly. "It's not alive, not like we are. It doesn't have a name, just hunger. It waits in the space between death and return. It watched me cross, and it learned me. You said it wants me now. Why? Because I loved you. I still do. And it thinks love is the door." Rosetta's throat tightened. "Then we close it." Howard laughed, broken and soft. "You can't close a door if you've already stepped through it. And I did. The night I died, something cracked open. I saw worlds stacked like mirrors. And this thing, it sits in the cracks, waiting for someone foolish enough to care about something more than themselves." Rosetta reached into her coat and pulled out the notebook. "Tell me how to stop it." Howard's hand shook as he took it. He flipped to the middle, to a page she hadn't noticed before. It showed the same symbol again, but with something added. A cross through the circle's split. "This," he whispered. "You have to draw it, burn it, speak it, but not near your home, not near anyone you care about. It'll try to break through. It'll lie to you." A sudden cold rushed into the warehouse. Rosetta froze. Howard's breath hitched. "It's here." In the shadows beyond the crates, something moved. Not fast, not loud, just a dragging sound, like something heavy, with too many limbs. Howard's eyes locked onto hers. "If it gets me again, it'll try to wear me like a mask. Don't believe anything that looks like me. Not unless I say the words. Split, but whole. That's how you'll know it's still me." Rosetta's voice cracked. "I don't want to lose you again. You never had me whole," he said softly. "Not until now." Then the lights burst. Darkness swallowed everything. She screamed his name, but there was only silence. And then a shape, massive, wrong, crawling along the ceiling like it bent gravity, descended into the space where he'd been. And Howard, gone, just gone. Rosetta stumbled back, notebook clutched to her chest. The symbol seared into her brain. She didn't know how she made it to her car, didn't know how her hands turned the key, or how the tires screeched out of the lot. All she knew was that she was alive, and it was coming. because love was the door, and she'd opened it. Rosetta didn't speak on the drive home. The silence in the car was so thick, it felt like the passenger seat wasn't empty. Her hands gripped the wheel so tight her knuckles ached. Every shadow on the road looked like it could reach out and touch her. Every flicker of her headlights in the mirrors made her heart stumble. Calvin was already outside when she pulled up, like he'd felt something was wrong. She got out of the car slowly, dazed. Her clothes smelled like ash and metal. Her hands were trembling. "He's gone," she said, her voice barely more than a breath. It took him. Calvin didn't ask for details. He just pulled her into his arms and held her, his hands strong, grounding her in the here and now. Later, as they sat in the kitchen under the soft buzz of the overhead light, she told him everything, the thing in the shadows, Howard's warning, the symbol and what it meant. She laid the notebook open between them, her fingers brushing the ink gently, like it might disappear if she pressed too hard. "We have to burn it," she said. "Draw the symbol, speak it, but not here, not near anyone else." Calvin nodded slowly, then pushed back from the table. "There's one place. My family owns a cabin out in Blue Hollow. Remote. No neighbors for miles." She looked up. "You think it'll be enough?" "I don't know," he said. "But if that's where it ends, I want to be there with you." They left at dawn. The drive to Blue Hollow took nearly 4 hours. Trees grew dense as they climbed into the mountains, fog curling between the trunks, like ghosts still deciding where to settle. The cabin was small, just a wooden frame with a crooked porch and a stone chimney that hadn't seen fire in years. But it was isolated, and that was all they needed. Rosetta wasted no time. She drew the symbol on the cabin floor with salt and charcoal. The circle split and crossed through, just like Howard had shown her. Calvin stood nearby with the notebook, reading aloud the words she needed to speak, over and over, so she could memorize them perfectly. Then night fell, and the cabin changed. It started with the temperature. Even with the fire burning, the room turned freezing. Then came the smell, wet dirt, old wood, and something deeper, like decay that had been waiting to surface. The shadows stretched too long, curling up walls, dipping across the floor in shapes that didn't match anything real. Then came the whisper. It started in the corners, barely audible. Then it pressed into their ears, curling into their minds. "Rosetta!" She dropped the match. The salt ignited instantly, the symbol bursting to life with a hiss of blue flame. "Say it!" Calvin yelled, backing up as the air in the room grew thick, like breathing soup. Rosetta's voice shook, but held. "Split but whole, by love made, by fire closed. Leave this world, leave me, or burn in the truth of your hunger." The flames rose, twisting upward, forming shapes, faces, screaming, writhing, reaching, and then it spoke in Howard's voice. "You never let me explain." Her heart nearly stopped. Calvin turned to her. "Don't listen," but it sounded just like him. Same tremble, same gentleness. Her soul ached to believe it. "Rosetta," it said again, softer now. "You said goodbye, but I never did. I need to say it, please." She stepped closer to the fire, her tears hot and stinging. Her voice cracked. "If it's really you, say it." Silence. Then, "I loved you in every life." Her breath caught, but Calvin's voice cut through. "That wasn't it. That wasn't the phrase." Rosetta blinked, eyes wide. "You're right." She turned back to the flame, her grief hardening into fury. "You don't get to wear him," she hissed. "You don't get him." And she screamed the phrase again, louder this time. "Split but whole, by love made, by fire closed." The fire roared, then collapsed in on itself, sucking the air out of the cabin. Like a void had opened, the symbol burned deep into the wood, glowing for a moment, then vanished. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean, whole, like a door had finally been slammed shut. Rosetta collapsed into Calvin's arms, shaking, and for the first time since Howard came back, the darkness didn't follow. They stayed at the cabin for 2 more days, just to be sure. The first night after the fire, Rosetta didn't dream, and that alone felt like a miracle. No shadows in the corners of her vision, no whispering voices that bled into the silence. Just sleep, deep and dreamless. Calvin held her close that night, one hand on her back, his breath steady against her neck. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. They both knew something had ended, and something else had begun. By the time they drove back to the city, the air felt lighter. Spring was starting to bloom around the edges of the sidewalks. Everything looked the same, but Rosetta felt different, grounded. Like a storm that had lived in her chest for years had finally passed, and she could breathe. In a new kind of air, the first thing she did when she got home was throw away the wedding photos. Not out of anger. There wasn't any bitterness left in her, just quiet acceptance. Those photos were of someone who hadn't known the truth yet. About Howard, about herself, about love. She didn't need reminders of a life built on vanishing acts. She framed one photo, though, just one. A simple one of her and Calvin, taken a week before Howard returned. He'd made her laugh in the middle of a crowded park, holding her coffee like it was sacred, and someone had snapped it without her knowing. In that picture, she was smiling, eyes bright. That was the face of a woman who didn't need to beg someone to stay. She looked at that photo now and saw the truth. She had survived the version of love that almost broke her and found one that didn't need fixing. Calvin never asked her to talk about it again. He didn't poke at the wound, didn't ask for her to relive it. But one evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset melt behind the trees, he finally spoke. Do you ever wonder if he's really gone? I mean, whatever it was that followed him. Rosetta thought about it for a long moment. Then she shook her head. No, I think it left when it realized it couldn't live off me. Not anymore. You're stronger than you know, he said, brushing her hair off her shoulder. No, she said gently, looking into his eyes. I just stopped giving myself away to people who didn't know what to do with a heart. He leaned in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, Well, I know exactly what to do with it. And she believed him. There were still moments, of course. Nights when the wind would hit the window just right, and she'd feel a flicker of the past, reaching for her. But she no longer opened the door. She let it knock. She let it ache. And then she let it pass. Because some love stories aren't meant to end in vows, or rings, or forever. Some are meant to break you open so you can rebuild. Rosetta didn't just survive the man who vanished before the vows. She tore the certificate and she handed her heart, not to a ghost from her past, but to someone who didn't run, to someone who stayed. And for the first time in her life, that was more than enough. The end.